Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to the channel. It's really good to see you on this fine Saturday that I'm recording it with my wet hair here. But I have a really exciting guitar lesson for you today. This is going to be a little bit more advanced again, kind of like my other videos. So it's going to really help you break through out of the simple diatonic circle of fifths that maybe a lot of you guys find yourselves doing. Overall, it's just going to be a really exciting video for a compositional standpoint, but also for your lead guitar standpoint. Because a common trend that we are seeing now in modern metal, myself included, is using darker chord progressions, more interesting sounding chord progressions that the norm that we heard maybe 20 years ago with new metal, or even before that with the 80s metal. We're having so many new characteristics of these chord progressions, these arpeggios, and these voice leading shapes and things like that, that you're going to want to learn and understand this to keep up and to really make awesome music. Okay, so as kind of a prerequisite, when I say the term dark chord, for example, really the meaning behind that is what sounds dark, what sounds scary, what sounds creepy, what sounds ominous. That's essentially what we're going to be focusing on. But there's a delicateness to it, to where you're not just doing diminished over and over again, or you're not just doing, although that might sound cool to you, there's a art to making it sound dark but also still keeping it very melodic, also still keeping it very interesting and unique, and also very beautiful sounding. Okay, you can think of bands like Opeth, for example. Michael, the main writer in it, he makes some of the coolest, darkest chord progressions, but it still sounds appealing to a modern audience, okay, because of that. So with that being said, let's get into it. So obviously the first thing that we really need to get good at when we talk about dark sounding chords and chord progressions and just dark music in general is understanding dark scales and intervals. Then we'll get into the chord progressions, okay? So by definition, obviously a darker sounding scale is going to have to do with the minor scales, okay? So obviously you can just use natural minor, but for our example, we're going to use things like the harmonic minor. We're also going to be using things like the Phrygian dominant. That would be another really good example. Okay, you can also use things like the Locrian. You can also use things like the flat 2. Okay, that's a really nice way you can do it. If you also watched my previous video about combining scales, we combined blues and harmonic minor. We created the Algerian scale. Which is a really nice one that we can use as well. So anything with that raised 7 in a minor, or the flat 2 is going to be really, really good, or the flat 5 is going to be great. Any scale with those in it is the ones you want to use, okay? You can use the diminished scale if you want to, or anything like that, but let's just stick with that for now because it's going to translate into the most important thing, which is the intervals, okay? So when you think of the word interval, think of the space between two notes, right? So there are certain intervals, like the minor second, that sound really dark, okay? A lot of people like the minor sixth, okay? That's another one that sounds really dark. Okay, so think of the funeral march, right? Right there is the flat 6 or the minor 6, okay? More on that flat 6 later when we talk about some of these really cool chords, but those are some of people's favorite intervals, okay? Obviously the tritone, I like the tritone, but I don't use it as much because I think it's kind of overdone. So those are some of the intervals that you can use. Now the big one, okay? Understanding tension chords and how to resolve them. Because like I said, playing dark music and sounding really dark doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stay dark. There's an elegance to it, right? So we want to still resolve the tension that we create. So obviously you're going to want to use things like the dominant and then resolve it, things like the diminished, and then resolve it. Okay, if you don't know things about the tension and release, I have another video on it. You can go ahead and check it out. It's a whole awesome full video about the 5 chord and then the diminished chord. So those are obviously really, really good to use. I don't recommend you use Augmented. It's better for the sci-fi sounding or the jazz sounding. So we're not going to go into Augmented or Augmented 7. But if you understand the tension stuff, where do we kind of go from there? Because obviously you can do dark things like the 1, the 4, the 6 maybe, and the 5, 7. Okay, take that knowledge and start using secondary dominants and secondary diminish. Okay, so the secondary dominant is simply a dominant or a 5 of another scale degree in the scale, except for diminish, because you can't really tonicize diminish. So let me give you an example. Let's say we were in the key of G minor, and I wanted to tonicize the 4th note, which is C. That's a C minor chord. So you got to think, what is the dominant chord in the C minor scale, which would be G7. Maybe do the 1, then maybe do the B flat, maybe then do the 6, then maybe do the 5 of 4, and then you're back to the C minor. Okay, and that's your new tonic. Let me give you another example. If we were in the key of D minor and you wanted to tonicize the note B flat, okay, all you have to do is think of the 5th note above B flat, a perfect 5th, which is F. So you basically play an F major or an F7 chord, so it'd sound like something like this. But now here's the twist. If you want this to sound really, really dark, okay, if you want this to sound really, really cool, this is what you're going to do essentially. You're going to take that standard of making it B flat major and turn it into B flat minor like this. Ooh, right? That's got a very, very dark sound now. Okay, let me give you another example of how we can use that and turn that on. Let's say we're in a really dark key, like, at least I think it sounds dark, A flat minor. That's a really cool sounding chord. Okay, here's what we're gonna do. I want to try to get to C sharp minor, which is the 4, right? So go up a 5th from there, which is gonna be this note right here, which is technically the original tonic, so it's like this. Sounds pretty cool. Now we're in C sharp minor, okay? That's how you use secondary dominance, and you're gonna do the same thing with the secondary leading tone, okay? The secondary leading tone is the same format because these secondary chords, they all have a lot of tension coming from them, okay? They all have a lot of tension coming from them. So that basically means that if we were in the key of F minor, say for example, the typical diminished chord is the 2, or if you're in harmonic, it's the 7, okay? However, what you can do is you can just think of another note in the scale, like maybe you want to use the 5. Think of wherever, if you're in C, think of whatever note would be diminished in C, which would be the 2. So 2 above C, like that. So we can start with F minor, maybe a 4, then maybe a 6, then maybe a diminished, and now we're in C minor. Okay, it sounds really, really cool, right? You can even spice that up even more by picking a major chord to tonicize and turning it into minor, still using the secondary diminish. So let's take a look at how that would work. Basically, if we were in the key of F minor, let's pick a major chord like A flat. My bad, A flat. So technically speaking, the 7 is supposed to be diminished, right? If 7 is supposed to be diminished, technically it still works with F. A lot of chord progressions and keys have the same diminished chord, which is really funny. But basically, you could do something like this. Right? It's not what you'd expect, but it works, and it sounds really, really creepy. If you want to solidify it, just use a secondary dominant, right? You could just do like... Right? If you're worried that people are going to be a little weirded out by it, just throw in the secondary at the 5 of 5, right? Or the 5 of whatever. So that's essentially how you're going to be using the secondary leading tones. Okay, so let's keep going and see what else we can do. Once you have those secondary chords down, this is when you can start using borrowed chords. So one of the easiest ways you can think of this is kind of like what we were doing earlier with tonicizing major chords in another scale degree but making them minor. That's essentially chord borrowing. So if you think of a scale like A minor, for example, we already know that the 3 chord is major, the 6 chord is major, right? And then the 7 chord is major if we're not doing harmonic minor, right? Well, technically speaking, if you look towards the parallel version of that, you can borrow chords from there. So instead of doing C major, you can do C sharp minor from the parallel major, A major. So I could do maybe a 1, a 4, maybe a 3, right? And then maybe go to the 5, and then go back to my 1. Okay? That's a really cool thing you can do. Let's do another example. So let's say in the key of A minor for now. Technically speaking, borrowing from the 6, which is usually F major, I can make it F sharp minor from the parallel major, right? So I can do 1, maybe 2, maybe 5, maybe 4, then maybe go into the borrowed F sharp minor, and then I can maybe go from there. Nearby, I can do something like that, then E7, back to the tonic. Okay, so if you're kind of getting confused of how I'm just coming up with these on the spot, which I am, I'm thinking a little bit less of the typical chord progressions that were like thrown into with the Western harmony. I'm thinking more of common tones. That's why I was looking at my fretboard of F sharp minor, and I noticed that I'm right here and then right here, they sound similar, right? Not perfectly, obviously, because there's a G sharp in there, but the fact that they both have a B in there, right, kind of works. And they have and technically a D since I used E7. Anyways, let's see if we can work out the reversal of that and see if that makes sense. So if we're in a major key like G major, we can borrow from the parallel minor G minor. So we could do a 1, we could do a 4, then we can do the borrowed B flat major. We can also do the borrowed D minor. Then we could maybe do a C minor. And now we're in G minor. Okay, so you can actually use these borrowed chords as secondary chords like we did before without even thinking about it. Okay? So you can play around with those things and have a really good time with it. Okay? We've gotten through a lot of these weird chords so far. Let's see what happens when we start using things that guys like Mozart, guys like Chopin would do back in the day. Okay? So a really good example of one of the darkest sounding chords that, guys like Beethoven would do, Chopin would do, is the Neapolitan chord. So the Neapolitan chord is very easy and it sounds really good, especially in minor keys. So it's essentially just a flat 2 major chord. Okay, let me repeat that one more time. It's a flat 2 major chord. So if you're in the key of A minor, the Neapolitan just go up a fret and it's major. But here's the way that I like to do it, because most people use it as a predominant. They go a 1, a Neapolitan 6th, which is first inversion, and then they go into the dominant, which is 5. And that's fine. It sounds alright, but I prefer to use the Neapolitan 6th to transition into the 4 or the 6 chord, another predominant. Let me show you why. When you're thinking about the Neapolitan 6th, and let's just think of it in root position, so if you're in A minor, it would be B flat, D, and F. Okay? If you're thinking about it like that, the 4 chord is D, F, A. So B flat, D, F, or D, F, A. They're almost the same chord. So if I play this, and this, they have a very similar ring to it, right? The same thing with the 6th chord, F, A, C, E, D, F. Okay, had a little tension and release there. So if we played in a chord progression, maybe do the 1, maybe do the Neapolitan, maybe do the 4, maybe do the 6, then maybe do the 5. Okay, those are all really nice things that you can do with the Neapolitan, so give those a try. If we kind of continue through some of this stuff, the other really cool chord that you can do is the augmented 6th chord, okay? So what I'll use for this example is the German augmented 6th, because in my opinion, it's the easiest one to figure out, because the augmented 6th essentially is built on the flatted 6th. This is in my opinion, easiest way to think about it. It's built on the flatted 6th or the minor 6th in whatever key you're in, okay? And you create a dominant 7 shape over it, okay? So the term augmented 6 comes from the interval of the root to the 7th, but the enharmonic is a little bit different, okay? That's why it's called an augmented 6 instead of just a 7, okay? So let's look at it like this. If I was in the key of A minor, tonic, you go to the flat 6th, then you play a, that is the German augmented 6 right there, okay? The only difference is if you do, like I said with the enharmonic, F, A, C, okay? And then we have E flat. What they want you to call that is D sharp. Because if you think about it like this, F, G, A, B, C, D sharp, that is a augmented 6. You're raising it, right? I know it's confusing. It's classical theory, right? A lot of people don't really use it anymore, but I think it sounds cool because you're going to use it as a predominant again. A 1, augmented 6, to a 5. Okay, sounds really cool, but when you start adding in more unique other chords in there, like maybe the 1, the diminished 2, the 4, the augmented 6, then maybe do the 5 of 5, then the 1 in our new key. Do you hear how that sounds with how we're colliding from one to the other? Let me spice it up even more for you. What if I do the 1, then I do the chord borrowed C sharp, and then I go up to the E minor, the minor 5, then I go to the augmented 6, and then I go to the 4, to the 5. So that's a cool way you could do it too, is you can cross and mix all of these over, you can modulate, you can do all sorts of things. One thing I forgot to mention is with chord borrowing, the chromatic mediant is another way that you can think of it. So essentially a chromatic mediant means that when you go up a minor third with a minor chord, that's what a chromatic mediant is. That's another way that you can think of this stuff, okay? And I love using them, so they're awesome. Another example that we can do is maybe let's take the key of C sharp minor, because we want to use weird keys, right? C sharp minor, my 1. Maybe I'll go to my Neapolitan. Then I'll go to my 4. Then I'll go to my secondary diminished to tonicize my 5. just like that. Okay, might sound a little bit weird at first, but when you put this stuff together and make really awesome music with it, it works very, very well. Okay, so those are some general ideas that you can use with those things. If you listen to Mozart, for example, listen to his Requiem. You can listen to the entire Requiem. You can look at it with a score. There's a lot of transcriptions of Lacrimosa that show all of the crazy amount of German augmented sixths in there. It shows the insanely good secondary chords in there. All kinds of really weird and cool stuff. So what you could do is borrow some of those things from him. Obviously don't steal it, but you can take after some of his ideas, even though it's public domain, technically speaking. Those guys really knew how to make sad and dark sounding chord progressions and really cool things. Okay, so if we talk about how things work on the fretboard when it comes to things like your shredding and your sweep picking, there's an infinite amount of things that you can start doing. Obviously the first step would be to make sure that you know your tonic, your dominant, right, your diminished. All that stuff is really, really important. If you need more help with that kind of stuff, reach out to me. I have a lot of resources that you can use. We'll get on a call and we'll talk about some things that could potentially help you. But if you already are at that level where you know your tension and release, and I mean you know it really good, to a point where if somebody says, hey, we're in C minor, you're like, boom, tonic, dominant, right, diminished, and then back to your tonic. Those are really important skills to have on guitar, in my opinion, okay? But if you're already there and you already want to start moving on to some of the other things that you do, get those arpeggio shapes and move them into the right spot. So if we did a 1 chord in the key of C minor, then maybe we can move to the Neapolitan, which is C sharp major. Then you can go to the 4 chord, and then maybe from there you can go to the secondary leading tone to try to tonicize G minor. So you can do A diminished, and then go to G minor. So let's try that all together. We've got the tonic, C minor. Then you've got the Neapolitan. Then you're going to go into the 4. Then we went to A diminished. And then you can tonicize G minor. Sounds really cool, right? It sounds very smooth and slick. Okay? So that's one example. Why don't we do one more just for fun? Let's go to the key of B minor. Okay, let's say we start with the tonic here. And then maybe we want to go over to the secondary dominant to try to tonicize A minor. So we can start here. And then we can do E7, which you could get right here. Right, then you're at A minor. Maybe do the diminished 2. D minor. Maybe we can start tonicizing D minor right there by using the dominant 8th major. Right, and now we're in that key. Let's try it with some more chromatic mediants. So let's move to D minor. Just like that, okay? If you're thinking of doing the German augmented sixth, remember, it's a dominant 7 shape, just on a different spot. So if you're in D minor, it's B flat. That's a really great spot to do it. Okay? If you need help with really mapping out these arpeggios and you need more direct help, again, click on the link below and get in touch with me. So, obviously, crafting those things are really, really important, but Combining these things with scales, scale shapes, and of course melodic lines is really important. So if we're in the key of D minor, I want to make it a little more melodic. What you should start doing before I play is start using chord extensions in your playing. That's good for your chords too, obviously. So instead of just regular D minor 9, maybe D minor right there, add the 13 up there. So if I were doing this, you could start with that, with the 9 right there. You could even do that. Then you can go into the... Do you see what I'm kind of doing? I'm adding passing tones or non-chord tones in the arpeggio. That's something you really got to get good at too, is when you have an arpeggio like F minor, you need to be able to add those chord extensions in there, okay? And then obviously there's the whole coming of the technique. And being able to merge your alternate picking with your sweeping. Anyways, I'm just making stuff up at this point, but you kind of get the idea. So make melodic lines and work with those. What I'm going to do at the end of this segment now is I'm going to just straight up noodle, okay? I'm just going to play around with all the concepts that I have and hopefully give you some inspiration. Let's do it.